Oh dear, learning fractions can be really tricky. I just about understand halves and maybe I can do my quarters, but sometimes when you write it down, it doesn't really make sense. And what helps is something really visual so that you can work out what's a half and what's a quarter. You can start with something that you can easily cut in half. So I've got an apple here, and I know that if I slice it down the middle, I'm going to get two equal parts. Two parts of a whole. My whole is my apple, and my two equal parts are halves. Yum, I'll eat that later. But you can do the same kind of thing with Lego. All you need to start with is one whole brick. And I've got this. This is my whole brick. And I'm going to use this to cut up into different sized parts. So I'm going to pop my whole Lego brick there. And it's a good size because it's 4 studs at the side and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 studs along the top. And that's a good size for breaking down into halves. You can try different size Lego, we'll look at that later. But for the moment, we're going to get 2 Lego bricks that fit on my whole. And because there's 2 of them, these are 2 halves of my whole Lego brick. 2 halves there. And I can make it even smaller. I can break it down into smaller bits because these bricks fit nicely over there. I've got 4 of those which fit on my whole, and so those are called quarters. 1, 2, 3, 4 quarters. I can make it even smaller now because I've got these little red ones. They're 2 by 2 studs. So I'll see how many I can get on just here. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 tiny red bricks that are 2 by 2. They're eighths. And I can go even smaller with these little 2 by 1 pieces. I wonder how many of these I'll get on. So these tiny pieces make up 16 parts of my whole. And so those are called sixteenths. I can probably go even smaller because this is the smallest Lego brick you can get, just one little stud on top. And we can fill our hole with 32 of these. Hope that I've got enough, so I'll just pop them here and we'll count them up as we go. So that's filled up the size of the whole Lego brick with 32 tiny little pieces. That shows how you can break a whole brick down into tiny parts. And we can give each of those tiny parts or tiny bricks a name. So if I grab this piece of paper, I'm going to write down what they all are. So the first one was one whole brick. And then it broke up into 2 parts, and they were each named a half. Then it broke up into 4 parts. That can go that way round just so it looks easier whichever way you want, but 4 parts are known as quarters. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of those on the whole brick. And then the next piece, which was 2 by 2, there were 8 of those. So they were known as eighths. And you can just carry on with the number of bricks that you've got. So there were 16 of those. That's a 16th. And last of all, that little tiny one, there were 32 of those. You don't get that fraction very often, but there we go. All the way up to a whole, broken down into 32 tiny pieces, and those are the fractions of the whole grey Lego brick. We're going to keep that, and we're going to use it to do some sums. So the first one I'm going to take is one of these little red ones, or 2 of them, and these you'll see were our eighths. So I've got 2/8 there. You can write that down. And then I'm going to take one of these white ones, which was 1/4. And we'll pop down 1/4 just there. Now normally that might be a bit tricky to work out, well, how many of a whole is it? Can I make it smaller? Can I make it into a certain number of quarters? What depends on what your question is. But what Lego helps us do is play around with our Lego to see how it outfits all together. And by doing that, you can see that those 2/8 are the same size as 1/4 because they fitted together. And 2/4 is the same size as 1/2. So I can do that calculation to show my 2/4 being the same as 1/2. We could try the same thing with these tiny little ones, which were 1/16 of a whole. So when we write it down, our numerator is 4, because I've got 4 of those little bits, and 16 is the denominator. 4/16. And I'm going to add that to some quarters. So I'm going to add it to 2/4. Those were the white ones, which we saw earlier. And when I put it all together, well, that really helps visually, because I can see all those little 16ths fit on top of my quarter. So I can probably work out, not one, that there are 3/4 altogether, because they all fitted nicely like that. So it just shows you how Lego can be really useful for a visual addition of fractions. Pop those away for the moment. You can also start with different sized shapes at the beginning of your calculations so that you can break a piece down into fifths or thirds. So here's a shape that I made with my Lego. Lego's great for this because you can make it into all different shapes and combinations. So I started with this, which I held together at the back, as my whole piece. So if you look at it from the top, it's 4 along the top left and 10 studs along the top. That's my whole, 4x10. And then I can break it up into smaller pieces. Well, they don't fit that way, so I'll try them along this side. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've broken that whole up into fifths. We can do it again with this piece that I've made. So I've stuck together ones that are 3 studs along the side, 6 studs along the top, held it together at the bottom with that piece, and that makes a whole brick, which is 3x6. And if I want to, I can break it down into smaller pieces. So that is 1 whole brick. And then I can fit on these little black pieces which are 2x3 studs, and you'll see how 3 of those go really nicely on top of my whole brick. So that must make them thirds. There's 3 pieces that fit evenly, they're thirds. And then you can make it even smaller again, just as we did before with these little 2x1 bits. 3 of those fit on a third, and if I counted them all up together, I would get 9 of those all together. So each of those is 1/9 of my whole brick. Just count them up, 1/9. And you can write that down like so, 1/9. And of course, you can break it up into even smaller pieces if you want to, and then try and work out how many of those tiny little pieces fit onto your thirds, how many fit onto your 9ths, and how many fit onto your whole brick, which is this one. So I hope that's shown you how you can use Lego to help with fractions, because you can really think visually and show how the sizes get smaller and how you can add different fractions together. But you can also use your Lego for all kinds of other maths operations and different challenges. So you might want to use it just to make out your number bonds to 10. This piece is 10 studs long, and you can use some smaller bits to make some addition problems like this. That's 6 plus 4, and here I'm going to make 5 plus 3, that one's just 3 long, plus 2. So you can get lots of different combinations of long bricks like that, and that can show you how those combinations will add up to 10. What about times tables? Here's my 4 times table using Lego bricks. 4, 8, 12, 16 studs altogether on these ones. Or you could do your 6 times table. There's 6 studs on that little brick. Then we've got 12. Add on another 18. So find different ways that Lego can help you with all the different areas of maths that you find tricky. So join us soon at Lego Club. Bye bye.